behind the public school system, how they desired to take control of people's lives, and that's why they became like prisons. That's why they became like machines. You know, it's such an artificial environment in the public schools. You know, a bell rings and you close the book and you go to another class and open another book. It's
Pavlovian. It's designed to be psychological warfare, re-education camp.
And it's not the way to learn.
We're not joking when we say it's a indoctrination and it's a re-education camp. They admit in their own documents it's a re-education camp.
That's right.
I mean, it's what it is.
So John Taylor Gatto was despised by all the other teachers. They wanted them to keep quiet. You know, we just want to do our job. You know, don't rock the boat. But he's the ultimate whistleblower.
Let's go to a clip of him, and we'll be right back. Get your comment on it.
At the turn of the century, an educator would appear who would have a lasting impact throughout the 20th century. His name would become synonymous with progressive education. John Dewey.
You can't make socialists out of individualists. Children who know how to think for themselves spoil the harmony of the collective society which is coming, where everyone is interdependent.
In 1896, he established the Experimental University of Chicago's Laboratory School, where the new trend in evolutionary psychology was to be tested on real children. This was where Darwinian science cruelly met education. To these quacks, the child had no soul, no sin, no emotions, no moral character. So over 100 years ago, we can see that the school bus was already loaded with everything from socialists, humanists, Unitarians, utopians, evolutionists, and shrinks.
I wonder how many more centuries we have to see this playing out in front of our eyes before we say something crazy going on here. Is there an idea more radical in the history of the human race than turning your children over to total strangers who you know nothing about and having those strangers work on your child's mind out of your sight for a period of 12 years? Could there be a more radical idea than that? Back in colonial days in America, if you proposed that as an idea, they'd burn you at the stake, you mad person.
Wow, that was an amazing clip. And again, that's just a small snapshot of what's in this amazing video. And folks, it's up to you out there to make sure everybody sees this. Tell us about some of the other folks in the film.
We interviewed a man called Samuel Blumenfeld, and it was an absolute honor to go and visit him up in Boston. And Boston's important because that's sort of the center of this compulsory education system through Horace Mann. And so Horace Mann, based on the Prussian model, decided that this was the way we needed to go, this militaristic, organized, compulsory education system.
That was a system where the Hessians were slave soldiers, but didn't even know they were and liked to die.
Right.
I mean, you talk about mind control, absolutely. And the globalists saw that. I mean, David Rockefeller, his ancestors and others, they said, this is the plan.
And I think there was religious motivation at the time as well, in that the Unitarians didn't see things the same way the Christian founding fathers would have seen things. They had a philosophy that didn't put God as the ultimate authority. It was sort of the humanistic approach to education, and that's what we started to see. And so humanism reigned throughout that era.
And the PhDs, they're going to make us better, but actually, the PhDs have to dumb us down because we're not letting them manage us.
That's right.
I mean, how sick is that to knowingly try to screw up young minds and turn them into robots?
Well, back in the 1800s, that was the movement. They started to view the child not as a person with a soul, but as a machine, this animal that could be retrained. Now, when you look now and you see children put on Ritalin or other drugs to pacify them, well, it started back then. They started to see that you just input things into this child. It's just information into this child and you'll get results. And so that was this sort of amoral experiment. As you could call it, an experiment on the child.
Which is a total revolution against the idea of 1776 and human liberty, and what God tries to give us is the free will. The devil wants to create slaves. God asks that you stand up. All the devil asks is you get on your knees.
That's right. The Bible says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Knowledge foundationally makes sense in a context of understanding a created universe, that God is a creator.
Well, they know the more knowledge you get, you're going to discover God. All these top Nobel Prize winners, scientists, geneticists who were atheists, they keep becoming Christians. They keep discovering God because when you actually do research things, you find out this was all built.
That's right. So Samuel Blumenfeld, he wrote a book called Is Public Education Necessary? And he's done that research. He's exposed Horace Mann and talked about the philosophy of the Unitarians and how it affected us. And he's talked at length about the effect of the way they teach English, the way the public schools are run, just as how inhumane they are and how harmful they are to children and parents, the lives of the children and the parents.
No, they're trying to take the children away, and they think your child's a robot. I mean, look at California. I saw a case, 3 years ago, where they said the state is the guardian, we own your children. That got overturned, but they're back with the forced inoculation.
That's right.
I mean, it's outrageous.
That's right, and you know, back to the idea that this is even in the best schools, because it's a hierarchical structure, because it's run from Washington, D.C. and through others, you can't escape it. So just saying, I'm in the country, I have a nice little school, and my teacher's really nice. Well, we've got examples in the film of a young woman called Sarah Laverdier who talks about what goes on in the playground. And even if your teacher's a nice Christian lady who loves the kids, it doesn't mean that the other teachers are like that either, are like that at all. So the undermining of the parental authority starts at that young age.
And the school is only one form of the indoctrination. You've got the television, all that culture, and then even though my children had never watched the brainwashing and the violent television, it's all regurgitated back by other children.
You can't escape it. And, you know, if you were on the playground, I was in the playground in a public school in Scotland back in the 80s, and it was probably better than it is now, because we didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have a friend with a cell phone who could show you everything that he wanted to show you. That's what you're seeing in the classrooms now. There's no moral guide within the classroom.
And that's why governments everywhere are saying, let the kids have the smartphones in the schools.
Right. And the parents, they can't be in the classroom. They're not allowed in the classroom. The kids aren't going to tell them all the things that are going on.
You're handing your kids over to a bunch of globalist scumbags. Let's go to this clip with one of the gentlemen you were just talking about.
Samuel Blumenfeld.
We have a significant problem in America. We've embraced socialism,
yes,
and we are far down the line. Nationalized health care, all the welfare that we
right,
have, bailing out banks, and it looks like would you say it's fair to say the public schools are an engine to that process?
Not only that, but the public schools themselves were a form of socialism. A state government education system is a socialist system. People don't realize that socialism was an ideology in this country as early as the 1820s. And it was brought to this country by Robert Owen, who believed that the cause of all of our problems was religion, and that children could be educated in such a way without religion to become anything you wanted. So he came to this country and he created the first secular communist colony in America called New Harmony, Indiana. And he thought that he could reform the universe by getting rid of religion. The best way to do that is to educate children without religion, so that they would create this new communist utopia in which everybody was equal.
Okay, so Samuel Blumenfeld, we interviewed him there in Harvard, and we interviewed him also in Lexington Green, and they're two important places. Obviously, there was an intellectual push with the Unitarians and the philosophy that undermined the Founding Fathers' more Christian perspective. In Lexington Green, that was the first place they had a teacher training college, and this was really established to bring in this new agenda, this new approach to future. They were futurists, you know, they were ambitious, they were utopians essentially. They believed that America could be fixed or made great if we just get rid of these problems.
Instead, they've turned it into the evil empire.
Yeah, exactly. The biggest problem for them was this bond that existed, and that was between the child and the parent. The parent had all these old ideas, you know, these old notions, and we are progressives. We need
well, that's what they say in their quotes, even in textbooks. They say the archaic family must be eradicated. The disease, every child is mentally ill because of the family.
That's right.
I mean, that's all of our development and humanity passing on common sense, they're saying all of that is bad.
And, you know, you get these young children in the schools, it's a natural inclination not to want to be there. They want to play. You know, and as homeschoolers, we give our children a huge amount of liberty in the books they read. They have Kindles and they pick what they want, and they come with Dad when he goes and does things. There's a remarkable amount of liberty in their lives that's enjoyable to them. They have natural lives.
Well, it's more of an apprenticeship is what they used to do, was the child was with their parents or with who parents trusted to put them with to actually learn adult skills, so they were adults by the time they were 10 or 11. Instead, it's the opposite, and you know that's something that you also get into in this film. It's just incredible. In fact, I want to, before we get to some more of these clips, I want to get into the fact that we continue to see homeschoolers get all the big scholarships. The homeschoolers win the spelling bees, the geography bees, you know, the best quarterbacks, everything. And it's because they just haven't been damaged by the state.
Yeah, we're seeing huge results, and we homeschool not because we want our kids to, it's not about academics for us, although we see that as a fruit. That always is the fruit of being in a loving environment. And you can't pay a teacher to love your kids. You can't put them in a private school and pay them enough to love your kids. What we're seeing is these children who are homeschooled excelling because they're allowed to make, they're in a loving environment, and their parents are giving them the education. And education is more than just facts and figures. That's the myth. If I can just send them to the public schools, they'll learn how to do math and science. But the problem is there's much more to being brought to maturity and to adulthood. And we're seeing men in their 30s and 40s behaving like children. This flight from maturity, that's a huge cultural problem of men not acting like mature men, whereas we look back in culture, we see young men even, running farms and running businesses at the age of 12 and 13 and going off to college and this is what we're getting back.
Well, my dad and then his dad growing up in farming communities, he was like 10 years old driving the tractor, doing the chickens. When he was like 11, they would just let him go for the summer to stay with family in Houston and work in businesses. I mean, he would just believe like it was an adult.
And you think of the happiness that brings a young man, playing around on a farm and doing real things, and that's what we want to encourage people to see. We're not just being blowhards here saying, we're smart because we homeschool or we don't go to public schools. We're saying, we really do have a concern, and this film was made out of a concern for young children in the public schools. We want you to know that there's an agenda there. We want you to know that they're in harm's way.
Well, by the way, Aldous Huxley, Julian Huxley was the first head of UNESCO that globally sets the education standards. It's on record. Our public schools are UNESCO run. DC follows its orders. They openly, in there he talks about in Brave New World, and of course Brave New World Revisited, written in the early 60s, he says, this is what we're really planning as eugenicists. This book is what we want to do. And he said, we're going to arrest the development where the worker class is always childlike. And we'll do it chemically as well. But there they are, and I talk to like 35-year-old men, and they say, well, I'm still young, I want to have fun. Then I talk to retirees, well, I'm retired, I want to have fun now. And they're never even men, and so many men I talk to, it's one thing to joke around sometimes, but they run away from serious issues. And then you read the documents where for over 150 years, it's all been planned. And it's so good to see somebody like you guys getting together, making a professional film, packaging it so well. I just hope that everyone gets indoctrination at INFOWARS.com and shows it to their friends and family. I want to show a few more clips like Horace Mann and others, but what if people want to have a showing at their church? What if